All right, let's just jump right into it. If you're tuning into this explainer, I'm guessing you've probably wrestled with procrastination at some point. You know the drill. You sit down to tackle a big project, write that super important email, or finally start that side hustle, and suddenly you're reorganizing your sock drawer or just mindlessly scrolling through social media for an hour. We have absolutely all been there. And traditionally, we're taught to view this as a character flaw. We label ourselves as lazy, unmotivated, or just lacking discipline. But today, we are going to radically reframe procrastination. We're going to look at it through the incredibly compassionate and highly effective lens of internal family systems therapy, or IFS for short. By the end of this explainer, you're going to see your procrastination not as a failure, but as something entirely different. So when we fail to be productive, our internal dialogue usually turns incredibly toxic, doesn't it? I'm such a loser, I'm pathetic, I'm unlovable. This is that harsh, intensely judgmental voice of the inner critic that just immediately goes on the attack the second we procrastinate. It lives totally rent-free in our heads, and man, it is one of the loudest, most persistent voices in our internal system. We kind of think that by beating ourselves up, we can somehow shame ourselves into being productive. But really ask yourself, has that ever actually worked for you long term? Usually, pouring on the shame just makes us feel worse, which then triggers even more avoidance. It's a vicious cycle. I want to challenge you to just drop the shame for a minute and consider a total paradigm shift. What if your procrastination isn't laziness at all? Like, what if it's actually a highly sophisticated psychological protector? What if the exact part of you that is putting off that important task is actually desperately trying to keep you safe from a massive wave of emotional overwhelm? It sounds crazy, but to really get how this works, we need to understand a foundational concept in IFS. Okay, so internal family systems is built on this fascinating idea called the multiplicity of the mind. Basically, this means we don't just have one single monolithic personality. Instead, our psyche is made up of multiple sub-personalities, which IFS simply calls parts. You can think of these parts almost like tiny people living inside you, and they each have their own feelings, their own perspectives, and crucially, their very own agendas. Think about it. Have you ever said, well, part of me really wants to finish this project, but another part of me just wants to play video games? That's not just a figure of speech. According to IFS, those are literal, distinct parts of your psychological system constantly interacting with each other. Now, in this model, the parts of you that interact with the outside world are called protectors, and they basically come in two main flavors: managers and firefighters. And these two are constantly battling it out in our minds. Managers are proactive. They run our day-to-day lives, they try to control our environment, and they relentlessly drive us to be perfect. Their whole goal is to prevent you from ever feeling pain or rejection. Firefighters, on the other hand, are entirely reactive. When the managers fail to keep the peace and emotional pain starts breaking through, boom, the firefighters rush in. They don't care at all about long-term consequences. Their only job is to numb the pain immediately. And they very often use things like procrastination to get that done. Let's look a little closer at those manager parts. They tend to take on really extreme roles, like the taskmaster or the perfectionist, constantly juggling clocks, briefcases, and endless demands. They're the ones always whispering in your ear, hey, if this project isn't absolutely flawless, you're going to get fired and everyone will think you're a fraud. They try to control absolutely every single situation so you never ever have to face failure. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. That relentless pressure is incredibly stressful for your internal system. It creates a massive, massive buildup of anxiety over time. And when that manager-induced anxiety gets way too high, the firefighters hear the alarm and burst onto the scene. Firefighters will use literally any extreme measure to put out the emotional fire. They'll make you oversleep, binge eat, completely dissociate, or just lose 6 hours straight to an internet binge. And right there at the very top of their toolkit is procrastinating. Procrastination is literally a firefighter hijacking your system to shut you down because the pressure from the manager has become completely dangerous. It's an emergency distraction tactic. But you gotta wonder, what exactly are both the managers and the firefighters trying so desperately to protect? Well, that brings us to the root cause of this whole internal tug-of-war: the exiles. Exiles are the deeply buried, incredibly vulnerable parts of us that hold on to unresolved pain, shame, and fear. They carry all the memories and raw emotions of past traumas or really painful experiences, like, say, being harshly criticized by a teacher when you were young or feeling totally unloved. These parts are often frozen in time right at the original point of wounding, so your managers are constantly working overtime to keep these exiles locked away so you don't have to feel their pain, and your firefighters act as the emergency backup system whenever an exile actually gets triggered. So let's connect the dots here. The exiles hold all those feelings we never, ever want to feel: unworthiness, humiliation, panic. Just imagine you sit down to write a difficult report. Almost instantly, your manager starts yelling, "This has to be perfect."
This intense pressure triggers a young exile inside you who remembers, I don't know, failing a test in third grade and feeling deeply humiliated. That exile's pain starts bubbling up to the surface. Instantly, your firefighter steps in and says, "Nope, we are absolutely not feeling that shame today. We are going to go watch YouTube videos instead." Seen this way, the procrastination isn't laziness at all. It's literally a rescue mission to save you from the exile's pain. Okay, so if we're totally trapped between driving managers, numbing firefighters, and wounded exiles, how in the world do we ever get anything done? Well, the answer lies in the very core of the IFS model, the self. When you are acting from the self, you exhibit what IFS calls the 8 C's: calm, compassion, curiosity, confidence, courage, clarity, creativity, and connection. The self possesses this profound natural healing energy. It's supposed to be the natural leader of our internal system. But the problem is, it often gets pushed completely aside when our protector parts panic and take over. This means that the goal of overcoming procrastination is completely different from what mainstream productivity gurus are always telling you. The goal of IFS is to achieve harmony by restoring trust in self-leadership. We don't want to destroy or banish your inner procrastinator. Remember, that firefighter is just trying to protect you. Instead, the goal is to liberate these parts from the extreme roles they've been forced into. We want to heal the exile so the manager can finally relax, which means the firefighter no longer needs to use procrastination to numb you out. Ultimately, we want your calm, compassionate self to take back the steering wheel. So how do we practically do this in the moment? We use a super helpful technique called unblending. When you are gripped by that sudden, overwhelming urge to procrastinate, you are currently blended with a firefighter part. You literally feel like you are the procrastination. Unblending is how we take a step back. Step 1, recognize and acknowledge that you're blended with a part. Just say to yourself, okay, a part of me really wants to avoid this right now. Step 2, notice how you actually experience it in your body. Maybe it's a tightness in your chest or a foggy feeling in your head. And step 3, ask the part to gently separate from you. Just ask it to step back a little bit so you can be with it, observing it, rather than being totally consumed by it. Doing this opens up the space for your true self to emerge. Once you've unblended and created that little bit of space, you can start building a real relationship with that procrastinating part using what's known as the 6 F's. First, you find the part in your body. Then, you focus on it. You flush it out. Like, what does it actually look like in your mind's eye? Next, you notice how you feel toward it. And this is absolutely crucial. If you feel angry or frustrated at it, that's just another manager part stepping in. You actually need to ask that angry part to step back too, until you feel genuine curiosity. Then you befriend the procrastinator. You ask it what it's trying to do for you. And finally, you ask about its fears. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't make me procrastinate right now? It'll almost always tell you it's afraid of the crushing pressure of your perfectionist manager or the deep pain of a hidden exile. By shifting your internal dialogue from harsh judgment to genuine curiosity, you completely change the dynamic of your mind. You literally stop fighting yourself and start healing yourself. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Next time you feel that familiar, overwhelming urge to procrastinate, how are you going to respond? Will you immediately unleash your inner manager and attack yourself with shame and criticism? Or will you pause, take a deep breath, unblend, and approach your hardworking firefighter with the calm, compassionate curiosity of your true self? The choice is entirely yours, and honestly, it changes everything. Thanks so much for watching this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.